Welcome to the Internal Divinity Show with thought leader Linda Lamp, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life. In this confusing and clouded world, sometimes we lose sight of our blessings and the light we carry inside us. In the next hour, Linda will show you the divinity that you have within you and give you the tools you need to let it shine forth. Become a force for good, strengthen your inner divinity, and help create the heaven on earth we all desire. The Internal Divinity Show starts now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Lamp, and you're watching or listening to the Internal Divinity Show, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with me for the next hour, and let me help you experience a new way to look at life and the world. Each month on the second Tuesday, I'll share secrets of life, and I'll answer your questions about how to see and experience more divinity in your own life. So this is designed to be a call-in show. I'm here to support you. So if you'd like to call in, the studio, please do. The studio number is 1-800-930-2819. And my wonderful producer, whose name I've completely forgotten because he's new this week, will assist you. And be sure to give him your email address so I can send you a free digital copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else, as my thank you for helping make the show greater than I could possibly make it on my own. So I always say we learn from each other's experiences. And as the famous poet Rumi said, we're all just walking each other home. And I like to add that hopefully we're doing it by being hope, love, and grace with ourselves and one another. So I'm so happy to be back with you this week. I have materials prepared, but I wanted to remind you that primarily I am here for you. This is why I like to do this show. I really want people to call in with their questions about how to navigate life and take advantage of me as a resource. And if you'd prefer to text, you can also text to 1-907-351-3003. That's the studio phone here in the studio with me. And so while we're waiting to hear from you with your questions and challenges that you're facing, I'll answer some questions that I have that have come in over the past month I have some questions that came in about evil. I have some that came in about religion. And if time allows, we'll take a deeper look at our root chakra. But I also have a couple of stories I'd like to share with you. Having said all of that, the universe has urged me today to start with something completely unplanned for. So as I was getting ready to do this show, the powers that be, the energy that I listen to and that plays a big role in my life, really want me to bring up the subject of trapped tears. And I think that the reason that I'm being urged to do this is that I think that through my own personal experiences recently with dealing with some health issues, what I've discovered, I believe, is a key that leads me to the conclusion that we are all packing around trapped tears that need healing and release. And if we can do that for ourselves, we'll end up not only being happier in our own selves, but we can be more loving and kind and joyful with others because we can have let go of these wounds that we carry. And what many of us have done a lot of inner work, right? A lot of us have already cleared a lot of our trapped tears from our childhood. And what's become clear to me in the last, month or so, through a couple of things that I've gone through, which I'm going to share with you now, it really looks like we need to spend some time dealing with the trapped tears from when we were pre-verbal, because we probably all have trapped tears from that period in our lives. And if we haven't cleared them, we're still carrying around that baggage. So let me share with you how I came to this subject today. And I'll be a little personal. I'm always very transparent with everyone, and so I hope I don't share too much information, but you do need some context, right? So I'm in my second half of my century. If I was going to be here for 100 years, I'm more than halfway through. And so when you get older, there are certain tests that, doctors want you to do on a regular basis to check your health. And because there is a lot of benefit to modern medicine. I will say that. You'll also hear me probably knock big pharma at some point. But in terms of actual modern medicine and preventive measures, our country has a good medical system, and we do a lot of good preventive screenings. And one of those includes a colonoscopy. And so what I've discovered about my body in the last few years doing colonoscopies is that I'm what I have come to call a polyp farmer for some reason. And I don't know why, and I've asked the doctors why. And I hold a Sunday circle with a bunch of ladies. We started during COVID, and we're still meeting every Sunday. And I was discussing this with them, and one of the members of the circle asked me if I had looked in what she referred to as the book. And what she meant was, I have a book from a doctor by the name of Michael J. Lincoln, and it's not the kind of book you read. It's like an encyclopedia. And it's an encyclopedia of the psychological meanings behind our ailments. It's a very thick tome, and it is filled with wisdom. What is interesting is that almost every entry ends with the summation that the root problem is something to do with a dysfunctional family. That does tend to be the universal answer at the end. But there are different variations of what the dysfunctional family might have been that will influence different ailments that we have. And so I want to just read to you a couple of excerpts out of that book so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So I went and I looked up in the book. And here's the other thing that's interesting, and it relates to the trapped tears, is that when I opened the book up, the book opened to the last thing I had looked up. And the last thing I had looked up was sleep apnea, because about a year and a half ago, not quite a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea, which certainly explained the 40 years of my life where I haven't gotten a good sleep. And maybe it was longer than that even. But and I'll read what that also said in a moment. But so when you look at all this information together, what you come to the realization of is that there's something here. And because we're all connected, I have to believe that this isn't just my unique experience, but this is likely a collective experience that we're all having at some level in our lives, especially when you understand that when you talk to a sleep doctor, they will tell you that everyone has some form of sleep apnea. It might be very slight, but it's still sleep apnea. And so, let's see, let me find, I have these notes here. Okay. Here's what it says about sleep apnea. And this is just a short excerpt. It has a lot more to say in the actual book. It says maternal deprivation. They are intensely sensitive, fearful, and longing for mother love or love from someone close. They have a lot of disappointment, bitterness, unforgivingness, and resentment over being overworked. In effect, they are so self-suppressing that they are self-suffocating themselves. Now, when you realize that a doctor will say, a sleep doctor will say that everybody has some form of sleep apnea, and when you realize that our physical bodies are reflections of our emotions and our memories, and not just our memories from this lifetime, but our collective memories and experiences from other lifetimes. And because there is no such time, as we've talked about before, no such thing as time, everything's really happening not in past lives, but in parallel lives. So anything that we've internalized from the time we've been pre-verbal can be related to this sleep apnea wound that we have. And the more we have felt unheard and unseen, I think the worse our sleep apnea might be. So now let me share with you what it says. I'm watching the time, and I want to make sure that I don't miss our breaks. When did he say that? At 3:12, right now. Okay, so we have about 3 minutes before we go to break. So I think I can share this. So let's see. Okay, here's what it says about polyps, because he doesn't in the book specifically say colon polyps, but he does speak both about colons and polyps. So let me read these two to you. Here's what he says about polyps. They are drowning in their own sorrow as a result. It is the result of a massively invasive and pervasively accusatory and exploitive family who operated out of extremely pessimistic and nihilistic benefits and resulting events. They are a product of an untrustworthy and rejecting dysfunctional family who were systematically undermining their capacity to cope. And then colon problems, processing problems, they're not being very successful in handling their personal shit, if you will. They're experiencing an overload of side effects, waste products, and distortions of their functioning arising from their dysfunctional childhood. It is a healing crisis effect in which they are being required to clear their tubes so that they can effectively channel their energies, resources, and intentions. So this is a great spot to break. Let me get to my my break material here. And when we come back, you know, if you can relate to any of these, please do call in. You are watching or listening to the Internal Divinity Show with Linda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll take any callers. And if we have time, we'll continue with the discussion we're having about trapped tears. Okay, we're back on Transformation Talk Radio with Internal Divinity and hosted by Linda Lamp. Before we continue, I want to make sure everyone knows how to contact me. You can talk or text me at 1-907-351-3003. That's also the studio number that I have here with me today. So if you'd like to call in on that number, you're welcome to, as well as the regular 800 number. And if you do call and get voicemail, please leave me a message. And also please realize that it may take me, depending on my schedule, a few days to return your call, or if you text message, I can usually be more responsive. But I did just get a call the other day from someone that I need to return their call. And I just, because of time zones and schedules, I still haven't had a chance to actually sit down and make the phone call where I can be in a nice quiet place. So do realize that I've got that going on my end. Remember, when you call in today, my free gift to you is a copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. It's Humanity's Handbook for Living Consciously in the 21st Century. So we were talking about trapped tears. And as you can see, Michael J. Lincoln really links everything back to our origins and our family, our house of origin, and our family experience that we had starting from day one, right? From day one, we got here. We might not have been able to talk for a while. I started walking and talking very young because I had an agenda. I knew I was here to do something, and I knew I was here to find somebody, and I was very motivated. And so I was an exceptional child in that I started walking and talking at 6 months. I wanted to get out of where I was, but and of course I didn't manage that, but I was motivated. So many of us, though, don't start really talking until we're considerably older, and even then, we may attempt to share things about ourselves and be shut down, experience being shut down, being told that either what we're saying isn't true or real, or that we don't know what we're talking about, or being laughed at, ridiculed. There are a number of experiences. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is that even though you could have asked me 6 months or a year ago, Linda, have you done all your internal work? Have you cleared all your baggage, put all your baggage down, cleared all your wounds, all of that? And I would have said yes. And if you had asked me, do you have a bunch of trapped tears in there somewhere? I would have probably said no. I've done that work. And yet going back and reading this Michael J. Lincoln material, and realizing that I'm having my housing is having these issues. My housing has for, as I said, at least 40 years not slept well. And obviously, the first however many years, 65 years or whatever, in that time, I grew 23 polyps in my colon. The real problem, to my way of thinking, is that 2 years later, I was supposed to get tested a year later, but because of COVID, it got postponed. So 2 years later, I had farmed 19 polyps. Now, this last year, I only had 5, but they've changed in quality. But what's interesting, too, is that the 5 that they found after I had started to do this trapped tear work, healing work. Because when I put all these pieces together, I realized that I needed to go back and give my younger self compassion for all those times that I cried myself to sleep as a child, for not being understood, or not being listened to, or being made fun of. And so I had already started that work. Is it possible that I cleared some of the polyps that might have been there in that time? I have no idea. If I continue this work, will I not have any polyps the next time? I have no idea. I can hope for that, though. But so the real issue here is, what are you packing around inside that you need to let out, that you need to let go of, that you need to heal? And I don't mean let go of it just because, oh, get over it. I don't mean let go of it in that way. We need to dig in and dig these things out and process them. And then we can let go of them. But they have meaning because they're still influencing us. And so they need attention and love. And there are ways that you can do this. Sometimes it's easier if you have somebody to work with you. And that's what a lot of compassion coaches are in existence for, is to help teach self-compassion. And so I offer, for example, sessions where we go together to the first time you felt a certain way, the first time you remember being sad about something or in pain about something, or perhaps it's even, the first time you were abused. There are lots of things that happened when we were young that need cleaning out, that need arms wrapped around us and healed. So if you have trapped tears, I encourage you, through whatever means you feel comfortable. We can talk about it here. You can reach out to me personally. You can email me at questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com, which is the name of the book. You can message me through my website at lindalamp.com. And remember, that's Linda with a Y, LYNDA LAMP, lindalamp.com. So if we don't have any callers, I'm not sure we want to spend much more time on this. As I said, I do have a couple of stories I might share about our physical bodies and how they work, that will show you or help illustrate. I know I shared the one from World War II and the Nazi concentration camp. But with the help of the same healer, I also have a couple of other stories. I was having trouble with my knee, my right knee. And we were camping. My first husband and stepson and I were camping. And I was wading in a creek. And I took a step. And my knee went out. And long story short, it seems like there was a piece of torn meniscus in there. And with the right doctor and the right manipulation, they could put it back. And that little piece of torn meniscus would fold back the way it should be. And my knee would go back to being normal. Without that, though, with it torn and folded over and cramped, I needed crutches. So I came to a point in my life where this knee was popping out on a fairly regular basis. And I contacted this healer, Alan Mesher, and we did at that point. So the first healing that I did with him had been a one-on-one, if you recall. This one we did over the phone. And this was really back in the day where we didn't have AirBuds or earbuds or any of those kinds of things. You were lucky if you had a wired headset. As I recall, with this conversation, we were on speakerphone. But basically, I just laid in my bed, and he was somewhere else in the world. And he led me into this process of just relaxing and tuning in. And he has a gift. He definitely has a gift. And I think I'm going to hold off on finishing this story until we come back from break, because we're getting really close to break. So do remember that I'd love for you to call in. If you want to call in during the break, it's a great time, because you have time to give Jonathan, my engineer, your email address so we can send you a free copy of the book. But I'm going to go ahead and start the break. Before we go, I want to tell you how you can find my live podcast with my co-host, Mary Ardania, that we do on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time and noon Pacific. It's called Let's Become a Beloved Society, conversations illuminating your path to wholeness. You can sign up on my YouTube channel to get notices, and that's Linda Lamp Illuminating Wholeness. And remember, it's LYNDA. And you can also find Facebook and YouTube links to the broadcast on my website, lindalamp.com, LYNDALAMP. We shoot for weekly broadcasts on Fridays. Sometimes life gets in the way, but we do our best to be there every Friday for you. And you can, so that's another place where you can interact with us. You can email your questions ahead of time to questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. I'm Linda Lamp, and you are listening or watching the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. If you want to call in, the number is 1-800-930-2819, or you can text 1-907-351-3003. We've done some talking about trapped tears, and right now I was getting ready to share a couple of stories, healing stories that I have that illustrate how our bodies in this world are being influenced at some level, some cellular level, by other worlds that we live in. And if you'll recall, we've talked about this in the past, but basically there is no such thing as time. Time is this weird third dimensional thing that we've created in order to experience life in a linear way. But from a physics point of view, everything is happening at once. And so rather than thinking about them as past lives, they are actually concurrent lives in other ages. So it's more of like a spiral that you see in a seashell or something like that, where it's all right here. It's not linear, it's not forward. And one of the reasons that we don't tend to travel forward in the spiral, upward beyond where we are now, is I think it's a safety mechanism, because if you're not operating from your soul agenda, and remember, your soul agenda is to create and experience heaven on earth by being hope, love, and joy with one another, and grace. So if you're not in that place and you move forward in time, it's your ego influencing the future, which is not how any of this can work. And so that's why we don't tend to go forward. Only the highest beings can travel forward in time. But for the most part, we can see the other time realms that in terms of our current life, we look at as history, right? So I was getting ready to share this life that I got a glimpse of, that I held for what I can best determine was some time in ancient England. And so through this work with Alan on the other end of the phone, coaching me, and but never coaching me with like locations or anything like that, never suggesting where I am. I'm providing all of the background and the information. But somehow he's opening this channel for me to be able to experience it and see it. And what I saw was this life where I had many, many children, born many children, gave birth to many babies. And due to the circumstances under which we lived, many of them did not survive. I don't know if it was because they starved, or I don't know why they didn't survive. But I had just had another baby that didn't survive. And where I was out in this graveyard in the rain. It was cold, it was damp, And I was wrapped around this tombstone, this little tombstone, sobbing on my knees. And when somebody came to get me, I couldn't walk because my knee, I had been there for way too long. And I don't know why that was, but for whatever reason, I couldn't straighten my knees out, either one of them, but the right one in particular was extremely frozen in that kneeling position. And so through this process with Alan, I sobbed, cried. And I have never really had the same kind of problem with my knee since. Now, to me, that's pretty remarkable, pretty miraculous. I won't say I've never had trouble with my knee. There was a time after that, there were a couple of times after that, where if I knelt for too long, right? So I have a lodging business, and depending on employee capabilities, I may end up having to clean myself. And what I learned early on was just don't kneel, because if I kneel on it for too long, that meniscus that's torn in there would get stuck again, and then I would have to have somebody unstick it. But the wobbliness, the collapsing out from underneath me, that completely disappeared. I never have had that experience again since that healing with him. So the other experience I wanted to share real quick was a number of years later. I'm thinking a good 10 years later, because this time I'm in Alaska. Those healings that I did with him were in Michigan. I was in Michigan. This one was after I had moved to Alaska, and I was having problems with something called polymyalgia rheumatica, which is some kind of malfunctioning of your immune system. But normally it happens only to women in their 80s, and I was still in my 40s, I think, at that point when I had it. And so I contacted Alan, and we did a session. And again, at this point now, I do have earbuds or headphones or something. But again, I'm just laying on a bed on the phone with him, and I'm telling him what my concern is. And he says to me, okay, but what about the lump in your abdomen? And I was like, what lump in my abdomen? And he says, I don't know, but I'm seeing a lump in your abdomen. Feel around in there, palpate around in there, see what you find. And you know what? I couldn't believe it. I palpated my right side, and there was a huge, hard lump. You would only find it by pressing in and pressing in on it. And I had no idea what it was. But as I started pressing in on it, a whole life flashed in front of me, where I was a man in some other life, and I had a brother. And in that life, I had stolen my brother's girlfriend. Now, let me tell you something about me. In my younger years, I was what some people would call a vixen. I was because I didn't intend to be a vixen. That was not anything part of me. I was simply looking for whoever it was had promised they were going to come here and be with me and help me on my mission, right? So I went through my entire younger years looking for a guy, looking for the guy. And that led me into a lot of extraneous relationships that didn't work out. And I have been told by a number of people that I broke a number of hearts. And for that, I am forever sorry. It was never my intention. But in the release of this lifetime that came forward, I could see that history, right? I could see that in another lifetime, I did the same thing. maybe not for the same reasons at all. And so the behavior, sometimes our behavior can be motivated truly through totally different things, even though it can look the same on the outside. And so after that session with Alan, it was like, I don't know. I sort of thought I was going to have to go into a doctor to discover what this lump was. But I didn't, because in the process of the next couple of days of me spending time with that lifetime, clearing that lifetime, making amends in that lifetime, apologizing in that lifetime, just energetically through prayer and meditation, that lump slowly over the next couple of days moved to the surface and basically dissipated and disappeared without ever changing the surface of the quality of my skin in any way, shape, or form. Just, I felt it one night as I was going to bed, and it was fairly close to the surface. And the next morning when I felt for it, it was gone. And there was no, there was nothing. There was nothing. There was no pain. There was no output. There was nothing. It was gone. And I think it was gone because I did that work. Now, I think had I chosen to not want to do the work and ignored the lump, I think it could have metastasized into some form of cancer or who knows what, right? So this is why I wanted to share these stories, because these are all basically stories about trapped tears. And I think it's super, super important that as human beings and individuals, we take the time to do what we can to heal ourselves, because it's only through self-love. It is only through honoring our beings as individuated aspects of divinity and understanding that we are each and every one of us. There's no us and them on this planet. We have a lot of us and them rules, and we have a lot of us and them attitudes, but ultimately there is no us and them. It's just we. We are all connected, and we are all one. And so this is why it is so important that we do that work, dig in, find that pain, and get it processed. And I'm here for you to help with that. So please take advantage of that. So before we take a break, I wanted to give you our audience an easy way to connect with me outside of the show. As I've mentioned, you can text me personally at 1-907-351-3003. You can send an email to questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. This is Transformation Talk Radio and Linda Lamp with the Internal Divinity Show. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. If you'd like to call in, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819. Or you can text us in the studio here at 1-907-351-3003. We're back on the Internal Divinity Show with Linda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. So we've been talking about a lot of things today. We've talked about trapped tears, and I've told you a couple of stories about how trapped tears from other lifetimes can actually be influencing pain and physical problems that you're having in this lifetime. And so I hope that these stories have been helpful to start to shed a light on how what we think about our bodies is really not as true as we've been told. There's a lot about our bodies and who we are and what we are that we haven't been told and that we don't understand. And because of that, we have these experiences in life that make us feel horrible, can bring us down, can depress us, can make us feel like we're victims. I mean, it's a long, long list. And so I am here to help elevate you and help you. What Neil Donald Walsh uses the word recontextualize a lot, which is basically to take something and look at it in a new way. And by doing that, allowing yourself to be able to release and heal things that perhaps you have been packing around and influencing your day-to-day life in ways, making you ill. If you hear this little bell in the background, it is my small service animal that's in my lap, and usually he sleeps, but for some reason right now he's awake and jumping around. So I wanted to spend, I did have a couple of questions that did come in. And hang on a second, I'm going to mute myself. Sorry about that. When I went to have that lovely colonoscopy, there was something going around, not COVID, but there are other things in the world besides COVID. And whatever it is, it got into my lungs, and it's really just sitting here. And I've heard that it's a fairly common experience lately, that there's something going around that's doing that, sitting in our lungs. So I was just scrolling back through my notes to see what those questions were, because as we know, I ended up talking about things I hadn't planned on today. So one of the questions was about religion. And having just had Easter, I think it's a fitting time. We can close up the next 10 minutes or so talking about Easter. Not Easter, but religion. All right, he's getting down. Okay, there he goes. So the questions that came in were, do religions help create a beloved society? Are all religions evil? And do religions promote evil? There were more questions than that, but they all tended to boil down to those three sentiments. So I do a podcast, I think I mentioned this, on Fridays, called Let's Become a Beloved Society. And we took this conversation up on Good Friday. And I think it's worth having a conversation here as well, because a lot of people don't really stop to think about, where did religion come from, right? We grow up in households that, and I'm going to go ahead and take this off because I don't need it for the dog. We grow up in households with parents who have made some decision already about religion for themselves, and usually for us. Now, in my case, my mother was, I think the polite thing to call her would be a skeptic, right? She was a skeptic. She was too smart for the Bible, because she could see the anomalies in the Bible, and the inconsistencies, and the hypocrisies, and the disconnect. So, but what she felt was, it was her obligation to take me around and teach me religion, at a minimum Christianity. And so she used to take me to all these different churches during our childhood, everything from Dutch Reform to High Episcopal to, she never went to a Catholic church, but they were always some kind of Christian church, Unitarian, you name it. And as a child, I was very aware of the hypocrisy. It seemed like everybody dressed up on Easter Sunday, but that people didn't really behave themselves the rest of the time. They weren't really good people, and that for the most part, they didn't behave in the ways that Jesus would have suggested we behave. And I have a great quote that I used in my book from Gandhi. It's a very famous quote of his. "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. They are so unlike Christ, your Christ. And that's true, because to be a Christian is to follow the teachings of Christ. And the teachings of Christ were of love and compassion, unity and forgiveness. And that is certainly not what we see in the world, not what we see in the world at all. And in fact, there's constantly a new religion being born as well. In this book, the statistic I came up with at the time, and this was published, I think it was 2006. When was it? Time flies. I can't keep track. And for whatever reason, this doesn't have it. Oh, there it is. Yes, 2006. So at that time, it said, in fact, a new Christian denomination is being established every 10.5 hours. So there's a lot of religions out there, and we are among the most religious countries in the world. I suppose because we were founded on religious freedom. But what most people don't realize about all religions is that if you start, and I did this as a 13-year-old, I spent hours and hours and hours at the library researching religion because it really troubled me. The inconsistencies and the hypocrisy really troubled me as a child. If you take any religion, I don't care what religion you pick to start with, and you trace it back as far as you can go, as far as you can into recorded history. First of all, what we find is that religion really is born out of burial traditions. That's where religions first started. And you get to the same place, the same word, the same 4-letter word: love. Love. It's a little hard to believe, isn't it, that love is the very first place that all religions started, especially when you look around the world and you look at the hate that's being propagated by religious people. Hate against people of color, hate against women and their bodies and their rights, all kinds of hate because people think their religion is better. They think they know better. They think they are better. So that's what I'll close with today, is to remind us all that where religion started was with the word love. And if we're going to solve what's wrong with this planet, we better find our way back to that. If you'd like to contact me, you can go to my website, lindalamp.com. That's LYNDALAMP.com. You can send a message through the website as well, or schedule a meeting. You can visit my online store. You can also become a subscriber if you like my work. If you go to the online store, you'll find digital and hard copies and paperback copies of my book, WalkingThroughYourWalls.com, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. I've had a wonderful time with you, and I hope you found the information I've shared interesting and helpful. Please feel free to reach out to me now or between now and the next show. I am Linda Lamp, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. Please join me the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, next month on May 9th. We'll dive deeper into the myths of busting life, the myth busting of life, rather, and I hope to see you then. Namaste and much love.
Thank you for joining in on the Internal Divinity Show. As we view our world through a new lens of understanding, we discover our inner light and power. When enough of us receive clarity about life, heaven will begin to show up. Come back next time on the second Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific Time for more inspiration and instruction on unleashing your inner deity. To learn more or to contact Linda, visit www.lindalamp.com. That's www.lindawithaylamp.com.